Egypt before the pharaohs. Full stop. Not the Egypt you learned about in school, not pyramids and mummies. The Egypt that came before all of that. The Egypt nobody talks about because admitting it exists means rewriting everything we thought we knew about the birth of civilization itself. We're talking about a culture so advanced, so organized, so sophisticated that by the time the first pharaoh unified Egypt around 3100 BC, they were already building on top of 3,000 years of prior development. Before we get started, make sure you like and subscribe for more content like this. 3,000 years, let that sink in. The pyramids aren't the beginning of the story. They're the middle chapter of a book that started so far back that the Egyptians themselves had forgotten where it began. And here's what keeps Egyptologists up at night. The further back you dig, the more advanced it gets. That's backward. That's not how civilization is supposed to work. You're supposed to start simple and get complex. Egypt did the opposite. The oldest sites show the most sophisticated planning. The earliest pottery is the finest. The first large-scale architecture is the most precisely aligned. And then over thousands of years, it gets messier, cruder, like watching a recording play in reverse. So what happened? Who were these people before the pharaohs? Where did they come from? And why does their existence make so many academics deeply uncomfortable? That's what this is about. The lost dynasties, the predynastic cultures. The Badarian, the Naqada, the mysterious people who carved the first gods into stone before written language existed to name them. The temples that predate the pharaohs by millennia. The astronomical alignments that shouldn't be possible without writing or metal tools. And the one site that breaks every rule. Nabta Playa. A stone circle in the Sahara Desert older than Stonehenge, aligned to stars with precision that required long-term observation, built by people we're told were primitive nomads. Except they weren't, and we're going to prove it. This story has everything. Megaliths, lost civilizations, a climate catastrophe that turned a green paradise into a desert, and a cover-up so embedded in academic tradition that even suggesting prehistoric Egypt was advanced gets you laughed out of the room. Not anymore. Let's go. First, let's destroy the timeline you were taught. You learned that civilization began in Mesopotamia around 3500 BC. Sumerians invented writing, built cities, created the wheel. Then Egypt copied them, built some pyramids, and history marched forward. Clean, simple, wrong. Egypt wasn't copying anyone. Egypt was already there. And the deeper we dig, the older it gets. In the 1920s, British archaeologist Gertrude Catton Thompson excavated a site in Upper Egypt near the modern town of Badari. What she found was pottery. Beautiful, thin-walled, rippled pottery with a distinctive red and black finish. It was so fine, so delicate, that it looked like it belonged in a museum, not a trash pit from 4400 BC. That's 1,300 years before the first pharaoh. The people who made it, now called the Badarian culture, weren't writing yet. They weren't building pyramids, but they were farming, herding cattle, crafting copper tools, and producing art that wouldn't look out of place in a modern gallery. Then in the 1890s, British Egyptologist Flinders Petrie dug further south near the town of Naqada. He found cemeteries, thousands of graves, organized, stratified, filled with goods that got progressively more complex the deeper he went. He divided what he found into 3 phases. Naqada I, Naqada II, Naqada III, spanning from roughly 4000 BC to 3100 BC. By Naqada III, you're seeing proto-hieroglyphs, massive mud brick structures, long-distance trade with Mesopotamia and Nubia, and the first signs of centralized authority. Kings before there were pharaohs. But here's the thing Petrie noticed that nobody wanted to talk about. The earliest phase, Naqada I, showed signs of organization that shouldn't exist yet. Planned settlements, systematic agriculture. Ceramic styles that were uniform across hundreds of miles, suggesting not just trade but cultural cohesion. These people weren't wandering hunter-gatherers figuring things out. They were already organized. So where did that organization come from? Petrie didn't know. Modern Egyptology still doesn't know. The official answer is they developed it locally over time, but there's no evidence of that gradual development. The Badarian culture appears suddenly in the archaeological record, already sophisticated. It's like opening a book to chapter 5 and being told chapters 1 through 4 never existed. That's predynastic Egypt, a civilization that shows up already running. Now you might think this is just an academic debate, some niche argument over pottery dates. It's not, because what came before the Badarians changes everything. In 1974, a team of archaeologists working in the remote southern Egyptian desert near the Sudanese border found something nobody expected. A stone circle, not small, not crude. A carefully arranged alignment of megaliths, some standing over 2 meters tall, placed in a pattern that matched the stars. It's called Nabta, and it's 7,000 years old. That makes it older than Stonehenge by 1,000 years. Older than the pyramids by 2,500 years. Older than the first pharaoh by 4,000 years. And it was built by people we're told didn't have the knowledge, the organization, or the reason to build something like that. Let's talk about Nabta, because this site more than anything else is the crack in the foundation of everything you were taught about ancient Egypt. Picture this. It's 5,000 BC. The Sahara isn't a desert yet. It's a savanna, green, wet, dotted with seasonal lakes. Herds of cattle graze. People live in semi-permanent settlements around these lakes, following the rains, hunting, fishing, and slowly, carefully watching the sky. At one of these lakes, a group of people starts placing stones, not randomly, deliberately. They align them to the cardinal directions. They mark the summer solstice. They create a stone circle that tracks the movement of stars, specifically the stars of Orion's belt, which in later Egyptian religion would become associated with Osiris, the god of the afterlife. But here's the problem. The people who built Nabta weren't supposed to know about astronomy. They weren't supposed to have the mathematical knowledge to calculate solstices. They weren't supposed to be capable of long-term planning, the kind that requires observing the sky for generations and passing that knowledge down. And yet they did it. The alignment is precise. The stones are placed with intention. And underneath some of those stones, archaeologists found something even stranger: buried sculptures. Carved rocks shaped like cattle, placed in chambers beneath the megaliths. This wasn't just a calendar. It was a ritual site, a sacred space, which means religion, organized religion, existed in Egypt 7,000 years ago, 3,000 years before writing, 4,000 years before the first temple to Ra or Horus or any of the gods we associate with Egypt. The implications are staggering. If these people had the knowledge to build Nabta, what else did they have? If they understood astronomy well enough to align stones to the solstice, did they have a calendar, a priesthood, a system of passing down knowledge that we've completely missed because it wasn't written? And here's the part that makes Egyptologists uncomfortable. Nabta isn't an isolated site. It's part of a pattern. All across predynastic Egypt, you find evidence of people doing things they shouldn't be able to do yet. At Hierakonpolis, a predynastic settlement in Upper Egypt, archaeologists found a massive ceremonial complex. Mud brick walls, courtyards, a building so large it could hold thousands of people. And it dates to 3,500 BC, 400 years before the first pharaoh. Inside, they found the earliest known Egyptian tomb painting. A mural showing boats, animals, and human figures engaged in what looks like a ritual or a battle. It's crude compared to later Egyptian art, but it's there. Organized. Intentional. At Abydos, the burial site of Egypt's earliest kings, archaeologists found tombs that predate the dynastic period. Graves filled with hundreds of jars of wine imported from the Levant. That means long-distance trade. That means ships capable of crossing the Mediterranean. That means economic systems, record-keeping, and political relationships with foreign powers, all before writing. The deeper you dig, the more complex it gets, and nobody has a clean explanation for why. The standard model of civilization says you start with hunter-gatherers, then you get agriculture, then villages, then towns, then cities, then writing, then kingdoms. It's supposed to be linear. Egypt doesn't follow that model. Egypt skips steps. Or more accurately, Egypt did those steps so far back that we've lost the evidence. And that brings us to the question nobody wants to ask out loud. What if predynastic Egypt wasn't the beginning? What if it was the continuation of something even older, something we haven't found yet? Or worse, something we've found and ignored because it doesn't fit the timeline. Before we go further, we need to talk about the climate. Because the Egypt that built Nabta, the Egypt that existed before the pharaohs, wasn't the Egypt you picture. It wasn't a desert. The Sahara Desert, the largest hot desert in the world covering most of North Africa today, wasn't always a desert. Between roughly 10,000 BC and 3,000 BC, it was green. Archaeologists call it the African humid period. Monsoon rains from the south pushed into the continent, lakes formed, rivers flowed, grasslands spread, and people moved in. Lots of people. Across the Sahara, archaeologists have found evidence of thriving human populations. Rock art showing giraffes, elephants, hippos, crocodiles, animals that require water, lots of it. Settlements near ancient lake beds, pottery, tools, graves. And then around 3000 BC it ended. The rain stopped, the lakes dried up, the grasslands turned to sand, and the people who had lived there for thousands of years had to move. Where did they go? East, to the Nile. That migration, that forced compression of populations into the narrow, fertile valley of the Nile River, is what most Egyptologists believe triggered the rise of dynastic Egypt. When resources are scarce and people are packed together, you need organization. You need leadership. You need systems to manage water, food, and conflict. That pressure creates kingdoms. So the story goes, the unification of Egypt under the first pharaoh, Narmer, around 3100 BC, wasn't a random event. It was the result of climate refugees from a dying Sahara bringing their knowledge, their culture, and their desperation to the Nile Valley. That makes sense, except for one problem. If those people were just nomadic herders fleeing a drought, how did they already know how to build Nabta Playa? How did they already have pottery styles that were uniform across 1,000 miles? How did they already have long-distance trade networks, astronomical knowledge, and organized religion? The climate collapse didn't create Egyptian civilization. It concentrated it, which means the civilization already existed, out there, in the Green Sahara, and when the desert came, it buried everything. Most of pre-dynastic Egypt is under sand now. Literally. The sites we found, Nabta Playa, Hierakonpolis, Baduri, Nakata, those are the ones that happen to be near the Nile or in places where erosion exposed them. How many others are still out there, buried under dunes, waiting? We don't know, we can't know, because the Sahara is enormous and we've barely scratched the surface. But here's what we do know. The people who walked out of that desert and into the Nile Valley around 3100 BC weren't starting from scratch. They were continuing something. And the pharaohs, the dynasties, the pyramids, all of it was built on a foundation that was already ancient by the time the first hieroglyph was carved. Now let's talk about the gods. Because the religion of pre-dynastic Egypt, the belief systems that existed before writing, before temples, before priests in linen robes chanting to Ra, that religion is where things get truly strange. The gods, you know, Ra, Osiris, Isis, Horus, they don't appear fully formed. They evolve, and when you trace them backward, they stop being gods and start being something else, something older. At Hierakonpolis, archaeologists found a ceremonial knife handle carved from ivory. It dates to around 3200 BC, just before the first dynasty. On it, carved in relief, is a figure, a man with the head of a falcon, Horus. Except Horus isn't a god yet, not officially. There's no temple to him, no written hymn, but he's already there, already recognizable, already associated with kingship. Where did he come from? The standard answer is that Horus was a local deity, a tribal god who got elevated when his followers gained power. But that doesn't explain why his iconography is already so developed. The falcon-headed figure, the connection to the sky, the association with kingship, all of that is in place before writing exists to define it, which means it was passed down orally. For how long? Decades? Centuries? Millennia? The same pattern shows up with Osiris. In later Egyptian mythology, Osiris is the god of the dead, the judge of souls, the ruler of the underworld. His story involves murder, resurrection, and cosmic balance. It's complex, layered, the kind of myth that takes a long time to develop. And yet by the time the pyramid texts, the oldest religious writings in Egypt, are carved into the walls of tombs around 2400 BC, Osiris is already ancient. The texts refer to him as if everyone knows who he is. No introduction needed. No origin story, he's just there. Which means his cult, his mythology, predates writing by a significant margin. How far back does it go? We don't know. But here's a clue. At Nabta Playa, underneath those megaliths aligned to Orion's belt, archaeologists found cattle burials. Not just bones, full ceremonial burials. Cattle placed in stone-lined chambers, treated with the same care as human graves. In later Egyptian religion, the bull is sacred, associated with strength, fertility, and kingship. The Apis bull, a living god, was worshipped in Memphis for thousands of years. But that tradition doesn't start in Memphis. It starts in the desert. 7,000 years ago, with people who didn't have writing, didn't have cities, but already understood that some things were sacred. The connection between Nabta Playa and later Egyptian religion isn't speculation. It's astronomical. The alignment of the stones to Orion's belt matches the alignment of the pyramids at Giza. Both point to the same stars. Both are oriented to the same cosmic symbolism. Orion as Osiris. The sky as a map of the afterlife. That's not a coincidence. That's continuity, which means the religion of dynastic Egypt, the temples, the priests, the gods, all of it is a continuation of something that started in the Green Sahara thousands of years earlier. And when the desert came, that religion didn't die. It moved to the Nile, and it became Egypt. But here's the question nobody has answered. If the religion is that old, what else survived? What other knowledge, what other systems, what other technologies were passed down from the pre-dynastic period into the age of the pharaohs? Because the pyramids, those impossible, perfectly aligned, astronomically precise monuments, don't come out of nowhere. They come from somewhere. And that somewhere is starting to look a lot like prehistoric Egypt. Let's talk about Göbekli Tepe, Not because it's in Egypt. It's not. It's in Turkey. But because it's the single most important archaeological discovery of the last 50 years, and it changes everything we thought we knew about prehistoric civilization, including Egypt. Göbekli Tepe is a temple complex. Massive stone pillars, some weighing 20 tons, carved with intricate reliefs of animals. Foxes, lions, scorpions, vultures, arranged in circular formations, built with tools that shouldn't exist yet, and it dates to 9600 BC. That's 11,600 years ago, 6,000 years before Nabta Playa, 7,000 years before the pyramids. It was built by hunter-gatherers, people who, according to every textbook written before 1995, weren't supposed to be capable of this. No agriculture, no cities, no writing, and yet they built it. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe forced archaeologists to rewrite the timeline of civilization. It proved that organized religion, monumental architecture, and complex society didn't require agriculture. They came first. Agriculture came after, as a response to the need to feed the people gathering at these sacred sites. That's the opposite of what we thought, and it has massive implications for Egypt. Because if hunter-gatherers in Turkey were building megalithic temples in 9600 BC, what were the people in North Africa doing? We know people were in the Sahara during the African humid period. We know they were herding cattle, making pottery, and watching the stars. And we know that by 5000 BC they were building Nabta Playa. So what were they doing in 9600 BC? We don't know, because we haven't found it yet. But the possibility, the very real possibility, is that there are sites in the Sahara, still buried, still waiting, that are as old as Göbekli Tepe. And if those sites exist, if we find them, the entire story of Egypt changes. It stops being a civilization that developed in isolation along the Nile. It becomes part of a much larger, much older story. A story of prehistoric cultures spread across North Africa and the Near East, building monuments, tracking stars, and developing belief systems that would eventually become the religions we recognize. Egypt wasn't the beginning, it was the inheritor. Now, here's where this gets controversial. And I mean career-ending, reputation-destroying controversial. Some researchers, and I'm talking about credentialed archaeologists and geologists, not fringe theorists, have suggested that some of Egypt's most famous monuments are older than we think. A lot older. The Sphinx, for example. The Great Sphinx of Giza, the massive limestone statue with the body of a lion and the head of a human, is officially dated to around 2500 BC, built during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre of the 4th dynasty. That date is based on the fact that the Sphinx sits near Khafre's pyramid and the face is thought to resemble him. But there's a problem. The Sphinx shows signs of water erosion. Deep vertical weathering patterns carved into the limestone by heavy rainfall, not wind erosion. Water erosion. Egypt hasn't had heavy rainfall in over 5,000 years. In the 1990s, geologist Robert Schoch examined the Sphinx and concluded that the weathering patterns were consistent with prolonged exposure to rain. He suggested the Sphinx could be 7,000 to 9,000 years old. Egyptologists lost their minds. They called him a pseudoscientist. They said he didn't understand the geology. They dismissed the entire argument without seriously engaging with the evidence. But Schoch isn't alone. Other geologists have looked at the Sphinx and reached similar conclusions. The weathering is real. The patterns are there, and the only explanation that fits is water, which means either the Sphinx is older than we think, or there was a period of heavy rainfall in Egypt much more recently than climate data suggests. Neither option is comfortable. If the Sphinx is older, it predates the Pharaohs, which means someone else built it. If there was recent rainfall, our understanding of Egypt's climate history is wrong. Either way, something doesn't add up, and the academic response has been to ignore it, not refute it. Ignore it, that's not science. That's dogma. The same issue shows up at other sites. The Valley Temple next to the Sphinx shows the same water erosion. The Osirian at Abydos, a massive underground temple made of giant limestone blocks, has no inscriptions, no decoration, and a construction style that doesn't match anything else in dynastic Egypt. It looks older, much older. But it's officially dated to the reign of Seti I around 1300 BC because it's near his temple. That's not evidence. That's assumption. And when you start questioning those assumptions, the whole timeline starts to wobble. Here's what we know for certain. Predynastic Egypt was far more advanced than we give it credit for. The people who lived there before the pharaohs had astronomy, agriculture, long-distance trade, organized religion, and monumental architecture. They passed that knowledge down. And when the climate collapsed and the Sahara turned to desert, they brought it to the Nile. The pharaohs didn't invent Egyptian civilization. They inherited it. And the further back we dig, the more we realize we're not looking at the beginning. We're looking at the middle of a story that started long before anyone was writing it down. So why don't we talk about this? Why isn't pre-dynastic Egypt taught in schools? Why do textbooks still start with Narmer and the first dynasty as if nothing came before? Because admitting that prehistoric Egypt was advanced opens a door that makes people uncomfortable. It suggests that civilization is older than we think. That knowledge can survive without writing. That monuments we attribute to pharaohs might have been built by people whose names we'll never know. And in some cases, it suggests that we might be wrong about the most famous structures in the world. That's not a small thing. That's a paradigm shift. And paradigm shifts don't happen easily. They happen when the evidence becomes so overwhelming that ignoring it is no longer an option. We're getting close. Every year, new sites are found. New dates are published. New evidence surfaces that pushes the timeline back further. Nabta Playa was discovered in 1974. Göbekli Tepe in 1995. What will we find in 2030, 2040? How much older will Egypt get? The people who built Nabta Playa didn't leave written records. They didn't carve their names into stone, but they left something more permanent. They left structures aligned to the stars, and those stars are still there, still in the same positions, still telling the same story. That 7,000 years ago, someone stood in the Sahara, looked up and understood. They understood cycles. They understood time. They understood that the sky was a clock, and if you watched it long enough, you could predict the future. That's not primitive, that's sophisticated. And it didn't come from nowhere, so where did it come from? Maybe from an even older culture, one we haven't found yet. One that existed during the African humid period when the Sahara was green and full of life. One that built monuments we'll never see because they're buried under miles of sand. Or maybe it came from something else. Something that doesn't fit into any model we have. A lost civilization, a forgotten people, a chapter of human history that got erased when the rain stopped and the desert swallowed everything. I'm not saying aliens. I'm not saying Atlantis. I'm saying we don't know. And the honest answer, the scientific answer, is that we should be looking harder. Because Egypt before the pharaohs isn't a footnote. It's the foundation. And if we don't understand the foundation, we don't understand Egypt. One last thing. Here's the question that should keep you up at night. If pre-dynastic Egypt was this advanced and we've only found a handful of sites, what else is out there? The Sahara Desert covers 9 million square kilometers. We've excavated a fraction of a percent of it. Nabta Playa was found by accident. Göbekli Tepe was found because a farmer noticed stones sticking out of a hill. How many other sites are still buried? How many stone circles, how many temples, how many settlements are under the sand right now, waiting? And what will they tell us when we find them? Will they push the timeline back another 1,000 years? 2,000? Will they show connections between Egypt and other prehistoric cultures we didn't know existed? Will they rewrite the story of civilization itself? Maybe, probably, and that's why this matters, because the story we tell about where we came from shapes how we see ourselves. For centuries, we've told a story that says civilization started in Mesopotamia, spread to Egypt, and everything before that was primitive. That story is wrong. Civilization is older, more widespread, more resilient. And the people who built it, the people who watched the stars and carved the stones and passed down the knowledge, they weren't primitive. They were us, just earlier. Egypt before the pharaohs isn't a mystery, it's a mirror. And the more we look into it, the more we see how much we forgot. The Badarians made pottery we can't replicate. The builders of Nabta Playa aligned stones to stars without metal tools. The people of Hierakonpolis organized thousands without writing. They did all of that. And then the desert came, and the knowledge moved to the Nile, where it became the pyramids, the temples, the gods, everything we think of as Egypt. But it didn't start there. It started in the Green Sahara, with people whose names we'll never know, who built things we're still finding, who watched the same stars we see tonight, and understood. If this made you think differently about Egypt, about civilization, about how much we've lost and how much we've yet to find, that's the point. Because the story isn't over, it's still being written, one excavation at a time, one stone circle at a time, one paradigm shift at a time. Egypt before the pharaohs was real, and it's still out there, waiting.